All right, everybody. Well, welcome back to Mind Controllers, a podcast about shining the light on the psychological aspects behind some of our favorite video games. I'm your host, Brandon Craw, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Joe Moreno.
Today, we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Finally.
You'll know our thoughts pretty soon.
I know, yeah. This episode, we are going to kind of start off with talking about our experiences of the game, like playing the game, just our initial thoughts. And then we're going to go into a character deep dive. And Joe's going to talk about Tifa and PTSD there. I'm going to talk about Red 13 and a concept called adverse childhood experiences, also often shortened to ACEs. Yeah, so with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and give our little intro here. Got to do the spoiler warning. You know, we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, so this is going to include anything that has to do with Final Fantasy VII, which you and I know there are a lot of spin-offs that have to do with Final Fantasy VII.
Mobile games.
Movies, yeah. Yeah, so all of that is free game here. I don't think we're going to be talking too much about a lot of extra stuff. I actually mentioned Crisis Core like once so in my discussion, but yeah.
Nice.
So, I'm not sure how much other than like how many spin-offs we'll be talking about. Anyways, like all of our discussions, all of these characters are fictional, have no intended resemblance to any real person or thing. Totally fictional. And also, we are not licensed therapists, so we do not have any sort of authority to make an official diagnosis. As we say, Joe is a associate therapist.
Correct.
So he has experience with seeing patients, but I mean, that doesn't give him authority to diagnose any of these characters either. So yeah, once again, we're all just talking, having fun here. And thank you all for joining on the ride. And with that being said, that out of the way, I think I will give a little description about the game. I'm going to talk about the story of this game, and then Joe's going to give a description on the gameplay. But I mean, if you've played any Final Fantasy VII or JRPG, you probably know already. But anyways, for the game, this is the second game in a trilogy of games, supposed trilogy, because the third game hasn't come out yet, and who knows if it will even end at 3, that tell the story of the original Final Fantasy VII, but with its own unique twist to some of the main plot points. So this game picks up right where Final Fantasy VII Remake left off, with Avalanche escaping out into this giant open world and the rest of the planet, other than Midgar, which was like the primary location of the previous game. And we join Cloud, Aerith, Tifa, Barret, and Red 13, also known as Avalanche, as they continue their quest to hunt down Sephiroth. So throughout this game, the crew is going through several different cities and towns, areas that are popular in the original game, such as Junon, Costa del Sol, Gold Saucer, and Gaga. And throughout the game, you're being hunted down and followed by the various members of Shinra's board of directors, including the son of the previous president and the new president of Shinra himself, Rufus Shinra. Along the way, Cloud's hallucinations begin intensifying, causing him to see Sephiroth nearly everywhere, which kind of results in sometimes hurting people because he sees Cloud as like maybe someone in his own crew, and then he will have this hallucinatory episode and then attack that crew member. There's one instance in particular where he attacks Tifa and like she falls into a giant vat of Mako. But throughout the game, we also see glimpses of another character named Zack Fair, who is another member of the kind of like the Marines of this world. They're called soldiers in like all capitals. And Zack Fair is also a friend of Cloud and Aerith. Throughout the game, though, Cloud doesn't quite remember who Zack is, but then you get glimpses of Zack and see that he clearly knows and cares for both Cloud and Aerith. So you're like, what's going on here? Why doesn't he remember who Zack is? So whenever we break and see Cloud or Zack's story, we see him often taking care of Cloud and Aerith, who have fallen sick in supposedly a separate timeline. Still not 100% sure. But that's what it seemed like. And as the game progresses, we are joined by some new cast members, such as Yuffie, who's a young woman who's part of a ninja clan who just wants to steal materia for money.
Such a gremlin.
Yeah, I know.
It's got that gremlin energy.
Yeah, totally. She's just like real quick to just like take the materia and run off with a bounty or with the score there. But we're also joined by Kate Sith, who we later find out is like a robot anthropomorphic cat who was in this like leadership position at the Gold Saucer. And the Gold Saucer is like, it's like Vegas in Final Fantasy VII world. We're also accompanied by Vincent Valentine, who's this seemingly vampire-like person with guns, and Sid, who is the captain of an airship that takes you between the areas. But Vincent and Sid are not playable characters.
Sadly.
I know. I feel like Vincent would have been such a fun playable character.
I'm sure in part 3.
Yeah, he's got to be. I mean,
in the OG, he was a playable character. And so was Sid.
Right. That's right. Oh, yeah. I forgot you told me that they were both playable in that game. Yeah, I'm sure in part 3, they were saving something for part 3. So Yuffie and Kate Sith are playable, and you could fight with them in the game. Towards the later half of the game, we learn that Sephiroth is hunting the fabled black materia, which can only be found in a secret Cetran temple. The Cetra are this ancient race that can harness magic, and currently Aerith is the only known living member of the Cetrans. But once at the temple, you see Shinra's already made their way there, fighting the temple's guardians while trying to make their way to the black materia. Thankfully, you're able to secure the black materia before Shinra can get to it. But once you get out of the temple, guess who shows up? Sephiroth appears and steals the black materia from you.
Yep.
So not too long after this, you finally confront Sephiroth in, I think it was the City of Ancients. And that's where Aerith is praying to try and like power up her white materia, which is another like fabled item that is meant to cleanse the planet of all the threats, probably in this case Sephiroth. So you fight Sephiroth in his giant devilish form and defeat him, but he still is able to prevent Aerith from casting her prayer. And huge spoiler warning, maybe you didn't know, but in case you're worried about this, I am talking right now to give you a chance to skip ahead 30 seconds. But Sephiroth kills Aerith, and then the crew mourns her passing, her death, before flying off pretty much to the next game. Because that's like the final scene in the game. But Cloud is still able to see these ghosts or like these remnants of Aerith.
He's
which
like
is
interacting with her.
Yeah, he's like talking to her and she's talking back to him. And this is unique to this game. This was not in the original.
Correct.
So not sure what's going to happen there. Yeah, this ending feels very sudden and a little messy, and we're going to talk a bit about that later in a second. So it's kind of hard to get a real sense of what happened and how to explain it.
Yeah.
So that's why I feel like I'm talking kind of vaguely right now while explaining this. But yeah, it's a weird ending. Anyways, I think that sums up the narrative aspects of the game. So, Joe, if you don't mind giving us a little rundown of how the game is played.
Gotcha. So for anyone unfamiliar with how the game is played, much like Final Fantasy VII Remake, it is a Japanese action RPG with active combat. Outside of combat, you explore the world and interact with people, solving side quests along the way of completing the main story. The game also introduces multiple areas throughout the world, with each area containing roughly 20 or so mini objectives to complete in this area, and it's a lot. Those maps are huge. These areas are often, different terrains, such as grasslands, deserts, jungles. You have the canyon.
Oh, yeah.
Cosmo
Canyon.
And then like a place that has like a lot of water around it, right? It's like near the ocean. That's like at the end with the chocobo that can use water to
the
like
Nibelheim area.
Glide and stuff. These are mostly optional, so that the mini quests are mostly optional, not totally necessary to complete the game, but offer some fun or interesting side objectives. Some of them involve playing mini games such as Queen's Blood, which is I enjoyed, which is a card-based game.
Yeah,
Fort Condor, I did not enjoy. Did you get a chance to try it?
No, I somehow dodged it the whole time.
All right, good for you. Good for you. I did not enjoy that one.
I know.
Yeah, there was another one called Final Gambit or something like that.
Oh,
with the little robots. I don't know if you tried that one in the canyon.
No, I did not.
Consider yourself lucky.
Oh man.
But yeah. So, there's mini games around, you're like going around the map scanning crystal. Think of like the Assassin's Creed towers, Let's see. You're fighting specific monsters that have like challenges, like beat them before they, beat them with a stagger, or beat them before they use their special skill, that kind of stuff. Don't let them put you to sleep. Those kind of things, little challenges like that. You can also choose 3 of the characters from your main party to use in combat. And there are some cool synergy attacks that you can use where your combat party teams up to unleash a special attack, which I really enjoyed. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah.
Also, the summons in this game were easier to summon, right?
Yeah, because you just had to stagger them once, which is like, once you attack an enemy enough times, there's like this second bar that's separate from their health bar that builds up, and once it like reaches... once it's full, then they're like staggered. They're like
tripped over.
So you could attack them as many times as you want for like 5 seconds or something like that. And then just triggering the stagger then allowed this separate meter to build up that once full allowed you to summon this like godlike entity to help you fight.
Right. Yeah. So in general, it feels like this game, compared to the previous game in the series, encourages the open world exploration more than just linear gameplay. Well, yeah, that makes sense, right? Yeah. Where you go through dungeons and areas that weren't really designed to explore. So yeah, I mean, these are big open areas. You can spend hours in these areas. I don't know if you would want to, though, because you don't get much from unlocking everything. Because I did almost everything on each map, and I was like, yeah, I'm good.
Oh, there must have... I mean, there was probably a trophy or something.
Yeah, you get a trophy, you know, if you're an achievement hunter.
Yeah.
But that's it. And no maybe some cool weapons, or not even like items and stuff that you can sell, craft, you know, that kind of stuff.
Okay. I mean, I guess that could have been fun. Because I think once you beat the game, there's a couple other like harder modes or like some boss challenges, I think, that you could fight. So that could be cool to like go back and like get the new items and take on those challenges.
Right. And I think when you beat the game and you can revisit chapters, I think you don't need to have Cloud in the party. So you can have like, you know, Barret, Red, Tifa.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that'd be helpful, because I felt like Cloud was like low-key one of the least powerful fighters like in combat. I would have much rather have like Barret, Tifa, not Luffy. Got One Piece on the mind. Yuffie as like my main three. It seems like we're already bleeding into our general thoughts about this game right now. So overall, like if you had to, I don't know, give it a rating or just give it a vibe, what would you give it right now?
I would give it like number score 1 out of 10, probably an 8 out of 10.
Oh,
yeah.
That's higher than when we last spoke about it. Okay.
It was at a 7 until I got to the ending, and I was like, you know what? I kind of enjoyed the ending. You know, went on Reddit to look up what the hell actually happened. I'm like, all right, cool. You know, the end, it's because this game felt like a big, long slog, right? The middle of a game, right? Because we're trying to get to part 3.
Yeah.
Right. So there was a lot of like, and maybe it was my fault for like engaging in all the side quests, the mini games. Maybe that's on me, right? But when I'm about to talk about Infinite Wealth, when you compare these mini games to Infinite Wealth's mini games, it doesn't even come close.
Yeah. I totally feel that. And I know we spoke about that a lot just off the air, and probably in the Infinite Wealth episode as well. Yeah. Like you said, this was like the middle part of the story. It felt like majority of the game, not a lot happened narratively. We got a little bit more into the Shinra board of directors and what's kind of going on behind the scenes from Shinra's point of view. Other than that, I don't know. There wasn't too much of that in the first game, so I didn't really care about it coming into this game. And it felt like this game wanted me to care more about that story, which I didn't. And I just wanted to know more about what the hell was going on with Cloud and Sephiroth and Aerith and Zack and like these multiple timeline thing. And they didn't really give you too much of that until the end.
Like the Zack stuff was spread out, right? And even then you couldn't play as Zack until the end of the game.
Yeah.
Right. I did enjoy Barrett's story though, with Dyne. Yeah. That was amazing. That was really good. And that's why like there are really good parts to this game.
Yeah.
There's really high highs and really low lows.
Yeah, totally. I know. It seems like there are some payoffs to some of the story bits that were built up in the first game, but they kind of come few and far between. For a game that took, how many hours did it take you to beat, would you say?
This one?
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm trying to think of my count. I think it was like 60 or 70 hours.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was around 60 as well. And for a 60-hour game, when that was me trying to beeline it as well.
Right, too. Yeah.
You want a bit more from your story, I feel like. The gameplay itself was great. I really enjoyed the combat. Like that
combat was amazing.
That was so good. I loved the music. Yeah. The music, it would get stuck in my head after I stopped playing the game. And that honestly doesn't happen too often for me. Like I enjoy video game soundtracks when I'm playing them, but they kind of escape my brain afterwards. But this one definitely
sticks with you.
Yeah. But yeah, the combat, I loved how throughout this game, encouraged you to try these other team members, and they wanted you to like kind of switch around and use these synergy attacks so that you could build up the I guess what were those combo-ish points called? Those little like notches.
Yeah,
I don't forgot what they're called.
Tactical points or something like that. But basically, you had to use your ATB meter, right? And it would, every time you use 1 meter, it gives you a little like pip. Of the other meter, right? And so you build enough, and then you can have those synergy attacks.
Yes. But it's like each person had to have at least 3.
Yeah, so you have to switch around.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I loved. I enjoyed like being able to do that and like incentivizing you to do that. And then you could get these like pretty fun, cool animations when you're attacking. Cool. And they were powerful too.
Oh, yeah.
I think like halfway through the game, I dropped the game to easy because some of the boss fights were just taking way too long for my
You take
taste.
a lot of damage in normal.
Yeah.
Like I noticed.
And the bosses don't. The bosses have crazy big health bar. And I was like, I don't feel like I'm getting too much out of this. Maybe that could have been on me and I could have done a better job at either exploiting the weaknesses of the bosses or learning some better synergy attacks or like learning not synergy attacks,
changing up the materia
like
as well.
the materia stuff too. I kind of kept that a bit stagnant. Oh, you just reminded me of kind of another complaint point I had where I felt like they really should have created loadouts.
That would have been nice.
Because especially when they force you to play other characters and like take your main character out of the story for a bit, you really want to just be able to hit the loadout and then go back to doing whatever you're doing.
Yeah. That'd be a good idea, actually.
Yeah. But instead, I spent like probably 5 minutes or so like clicking around
the materia. Fumbling around,
Yeah. There was no great way to do it. I know there's, you could open it up where you see all of it and then just switch between people's, but even that feels a little clumsy. So I wish there was a bit more like intuitive quality of life stuff there.
Right.
Yeah, I think we already talked about the open world stuff where I also didn't enjoy it too much. It felt quite checklisty to me, and there were some things that were fun about it. Like I did enjoy the Queen's Blood stuff. I wish I played a bit more of it, and I still could. I could go back to it. The monster fights were kind of fun too. I think the stuff where you like have to go and find those crystals to scan the crystals to get like some lore bits and stuff. Like the crystal scanning stuff was pretty boring. I really did not like the fact that they made you press like triangle at the exact same time in the same 3 button sequence.
It's interactive though.
Oh man. I wish it were more. Like, if you're going to throw that in there, at least do something interesting with it. I kind of dug the Titan thing where
the summons where you have to do the little
wheel.
Yeah.
It's like a little clock and there's like a hand at midnight, and then once you hit go or whatever, then the clock spins around the wheel and goes back to the midnight.
That was okay. I hated it at 3 a.m. though, when I was like half dead and I'm like, oh God, dude, I don't got the capacity for this right now.
See, that's why I fall asleep at 10:30.
Oh no. Maybe on weekdays.
Yeah, I get that too. It was a little challenging to remember, especially later on in the game when you have like 7 to 8 inputs that you have to hit while the clock hand is going around the wheel.
Right.
At the right moment. It got a bit confusing. But yeah, all in all, I'd say I'd probably give the game around an 8 out of 10 as well.
Okay.
Because the ending did kind of save it for me.
Yeah, I like the ending. Yeah. It was good.
It gave me all of the narrative beats that I was looking for, and it gave me the chance to enjoy the combat a bit more because, once again, I had it on easy, and it felt like the difficulty and then the like amount of boss health was pretty well tuned for that final fight on easy. I forget, did you played it on normal?
I played it on normal, and then I heard so much crap about the final boss. I'm like, I'm just going to drop it to easy because I don't got time for this.
Too.
Yeah, but I almost died in one of the fights.
Yeah, me too.
Until Nanaki had his final move or whatever, that special move that they have. What is it called?
Not a limit break?
Yeah, I think it was a limit break. Yeah. Okay. I had his limit break. I used it on Sephiroth, and Nanaki was the only one alive with like 200 health left.
Oh, man.
So he was able to take out Sephiroth. I was like, thank goodness I don't have to repeat this fight.
Yeah.
No way. Yeah, I dropped it for that. I was like, I don't want to mess with that. No.
Yeah, that fight, I really enjoyed a lot of the mechanics of it. It was really fun. I also was like down to like maybe one or I think I had Barrett and maybe it was Nanaki like at quarter health each, and I was just like, oh crap, and I was constantly like dodging stuff. But yeah, that was a very satisfying fight, and I really enjoyed it.
I liked it. It was long as heck though.
Plus, you got to play as Zack
finally.
Yeah,
thank God.
Yeah,
I was so happy about that.
Weird to have him on the cover of the game, and yet you play as him for a total of like 5 minutes throughout the whole 60-hour game.
The final part of the game.
Yeah. All in all, very glad I played this game still.
Oh yeah, I don't regret it at all.
I'm going to play the next game. You know, it kind of came out during a pretty good time as well. There was a bit of a gaming lull. I know I did rush to beat
I think for you,
Infinite Wealth.
Not for me.
Yeah.
I was like, fuck, because Persona 3R came out, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And Final Fantasy 7 was like a week before, and I was like, dude, how am I going to do this?
Yeah.
So I just put all my time into Final Fantasy 7, beat it, and yeah, I mean, the rest is history.
Yeah. I'm glad we finally had a chance to talk about it and get a lot of it off of our chest. I'm looking forward to seeing how they present the next game, presumably called what was the
Reunion?
Reunion, yeah. We'll just call it Reunion for now until they come up with a better name. But in the game, it felt like every other cutscene, someone's saying Reunion or like.
Think about it as a homecoming or something like that. Right? It's not death, it's a homecoming.
Yeah,
Reunion.
that was like Sephiroth's favorite phrase that Cloud started saying too, and
put that
was
on a car
scary.
sticker.
Put that on the what?
On the car sticker, on a bumper.
Oh man, yeah, just with a little Sephiroth
on it. Yeah,
half Sephiroth, half Cloud. Come on, Square Enix, we're doing the marketing for you. I don't know. You feel ready to dive into the character discussion here?
One last thing.
Yeah.
Was that I just want to say, we gave it both an 8 out of 10, right? And this is for the middle part of the game, which is pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
Right. I can only imagine what the third part has in store. I mean, I played the original, and Reddit's like, this shit's gonna be crazy. Right. So I'm like, okay, if this was an 8, part 3 is gonna be fire.
It better be.
Because I mean, I hope it is.
Yeah. Hopefully they don't fumble the bag, but I'm sure they won't. I think it's gonna be.
It'll be more focused for sure.
Yeah. I think they're going to see, that final stretch in sight and be able to really hone in on what made this game so good. Hopefully they at least for me, I would hope they tame down a bit on the open worldness of the game. Fewer checklisty things to do. As much as people complain about linear dungeons and stuff, I low-key kind of missed it. And whenever that happened in this game, I welcomed it. Mm-hmm. So I kind of hope they do a bit more of that. I think I told you how Red 13's cave trial sequence, which I'll talk about a bit later, was one of my favorite parts of the game.
It was good. Yeah. I really enjoyed that part.
And I would love more moments like that. Yeah. I don't know. What do you feel like they could do to make this game, I guess, better for you? Or like
to make it like a 9 or a 10 or something like that?
Yeah, for the next game,
I think the maps were too big. There's too many things to do on that map. I just felt unfocused in those maps. It's like, oh, here's the main story, right? But let me go ride the chocobo. Let me go find the chocobo, which...
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I know. We got some grievances on that one.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was rough.
And just make the mini games a little bit more, I don't know, fun and less... Some of them felt cheap. Like, when I lost, I was like, what the heck?
It was unfair.
Yeah, it was unfair. For sure.
I totally agree there.
And I was like, that deters me from trying again because it doesn't leave you with a good feeling. Like the piano mini game.
I didn't even want to try that one.
Hated it.
Yeah.
Terrible at it.
It's hard. I think I might have mentioned already on a different pod how I've listened to some other podcasters talk about that. Some other podcasters who are musicians talked about how hard that game is, that mini game is. And I do music too, and I play piano. I know how to play piano. Playing piano on a controller.
I didn't like it.
So much harder than playing the real thing.
I don't like it. No.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Cool.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for listening to us complain and moan about this. Yeah, I don't know. I think we had a lot to say because we love the game and we love these types of games.
Yeah.
Love the franchise and we want it to be as best as it could be to us.
Right. Would you play it again?
Would I play it again? Not gonna lie, if I wasn't playing like 5 other games right now, I think I might have dived back into.
I agree. If I was like 15, 16, high school, had a lot of free time, bro, I'd be on New Game Plus 3 or something now.
I know. Right. Yeah, I could see that. I guess all in all, it was a good game. I
enjoyed my time.
Enjoyed it. Things that left us wanting, but it's okay.
That's life.
Yeah, that's life. All right, Joe. Well, without further ado, give us a discussion on Tifa Lockhart.
Gotcha. So let's talk a little bit about best girl, right? Tifa.
You said best girl.
Yeah, I mean, well, I can't talk about Cloud. I already talked about Cloud,
Yeah.
We got to leave Sephiroth for the last, for reunion.
Oh, yes.
But let's talk about Tifa. So she was born on May 3rd, 1987 in Nibelheim to Brian Lockhart and Thea Lockhart. As a child, she was outgoing and would hang out with friends Emilio, Tyler, and Lester, but she was not too close to Cloud. Tifa's mother, Thea, died when Tifa was 8 years old, which is when Tifa was not in a good space, where she grew apart from friends. I mean, she was mourning her mother. Coping with trauma, Tifa came to believe that her mother had gone to Mount Nibel and that she could meet her mother again if she crossed the mountain. So I remember in the first podcast when we were talking about Final Fantasy VII, I think I said I'm not too sure why she went up to Mount Nibel. Now I know why.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
She was looking for mom, right? She had a belief that mom would be up there, right? So friends and Cloud followed to protect her, but instead her friends, Emilio, Tyler, and Lester, ditched her. This is a scary bridge or something, right? Tifa took a misstep on the Nibel Bridge, which is like this rickety bridge. We've seen it.
Yeah.
It's terrible. I would never cross that.
No.
Screw that.
No, not
Cloud tried to catch her, but they both fell, and they were injured. So her father found Tifa severely injured and in a coma for 7 days. And Cloud was blamed by Tifa's father. Which is totally unfair to Cloud.
Yeah,
right?
He tried saving her.
Yeah. So as the years continued, the women of Nibelheim would pitch in to help Tifa learn skills such as cooking, sewing. At the age of 12, she was given a cat by the name of Fluffy by the village elder Xander, where she poured her time and energy into. So she had things, right? She had things like learning skills, a pet to take care of. So, with the mourning, she had her time to mourn, right? But she also was productive and had something to put energy into, which is, something good because she didn't allow that trauma to fester. So when she was 13, Cloud announced that he was leaving to become a soldier. This is the scene on the water tower. That's like infamous, right? They're like sitting. Yeah. It's like at night. It's like the stars are out, and then Cloud promised to protect Tifa if she was ever trapped or in trouble. And we learned that Tifa's actually trained by Zangan, which is like a martial artist.
Oh right, we meet him in the game. Oh
yeah, we do. We meet him when we hit, I think, Nibelheim.
Yeah,
right? He's like a buff dude, right? He's like taught Tifa. He's like
looks like a Street Fighter character.
Yeah, I think we meet him before Nibelheim. Because he says a line where, like, to Cloud, like, Tifa possesses, like, great aptitude and, like, she can go far, right? And Cloud's like, yeah, right. I don't know if you remember that scene. It was, like, very early in the game.
I kind of do, yeah. I think I took note of it, actually. Gotcha. I think I wrote his name down in that line.
Yeah, so, Tifa's, doing martial arts, right? And she's got potential. So then we learned that Sephiroth sets Nibelheim ablaze around time 2002, right? This is
so casually.
Well, bro, we've seen it so many times, the iterations of it, right? Burns it all down. He learns that, the secrets of who Sephiroth, who himself is, how he was born, right?
Yeah.
Sephiroth just destroys everything. He goes crazy. So eventually, Tifa's father, like, follows Sephiroth, tries to stop him right at the reactor.
Yeah.
Sephiroth's not having it. He just kills him. Kills him outright, right? Kills Tifa's father. Tifa finds out, because I think she followed her dad. And Tifa was like, upset, obviously. She tries to fight Sephiroth, but Sephiroth wins. Of course he does. Have you seen him in Smash Bros? He's got a moveset. He's got a good moveset. So, she's like impaled essentially, right? Cloud thinks she's dead, which gets into the, when he's like, oh, I don't know if you're real. When Sephiroth gets into Cloud's head and is like, is Tifa really real? You saw her die.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And that messes with Cloud.
Right? He starts questioning it.
But she's not dead. She's alive. The way that she survives is that Zangan, right, her, martial arts instructor, finds her, supposedly casts cure on her because, the curing magic, right?
Oh, yeah.
Tifa was alive enough to make it to Dr. Chiron in Corel, right? And then she gets treated. So eventually she was discharged in the hospital. And I didn't even catch this in the remake or in... because I was like, this happened? But she was in debt due to another doctor, Oranje, overcharging her 3 times of the actual cost of the treatment.
Oh my God.
So that's how she gets into Sector 8 to like take up jobs, like selling steam buns, doing like odd jobs.
Oh.
That's how she ends up there. She needs to make money to pay that debt off.
Damn, that sucks.
But eventually they meet Marl, which is the older lady, and part of that's in charge of like those apartments that we see in the Sector 7. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And she meets Wedge, Biggs, Jesse, eventually meets up with Barrett, and they all become friends over time, right? And so the way that she ends up in Seventh Heaven, which is the bar, is she ends up in Sector 7, right? Sees that this owner is struggling with the bar, right? Pitches in, helps out. The owner passes away. And so after the owner passes away, I guess, there was a 200,000 gil payment that was due to the property on the owner's estate. Tifa was able to cover like all of it, about 160 grand.
Wow.
Because she saved up with her jobs. She was very responsible. So she couldn't pay off her debt, her medical debt though. Tifa settled it when Barrett found out what was going on with the doctor. And you know how Barrett is.
Oh, yeah.
He does not like injustices.
No, I'm sure he gave him a talking to.
Yeah, I'm sure he did. So the debt was forgiven. So then, she's a proprietor of the bar. That's where we see her, in Remake. And that's where she's working. She's bonding with Biggs, Wedge, Tifa herself is bonding with everyone else.
Right.
And then Cloud shows up. And that's where a remake happens.
Oh, okay.
That's where the game begins. Yeah. So currently, I have to do like a little bit backtracking, right? Because she's part of Avalanche. They're doing the bombings to the reactors, right? Essentially, she's conspiring with them, even though I don't think she likes the violence that's portrayed. What's going on, all the people that are dying. Bombing the reactor itself. She's not a big fan of that. And so they lose friends, of course. She loses Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge. She also sees Barrett get skewered at the end of Remake with Sephiroth. Stabs him, but he's not supposed to die, so the Whispers bring him back. Yeah. But seeing your friend die like that's messed up.
Yeah, that'll have some lasting impact.
Right.
For sure.
So fast forward, when the plate of Sector 7 is dropped to get rid of Avalanche, because Shinra's like, let's just get rid of all of them. So drop the plate, kill everybody in Sector 7. Meaning Tifa witnessed the destruction of her new home, people she interacted with, which is horrible. All these bonds and whatnot that she was building in Sector 7 gone. And so once we get into Rebirth, in Calm, when Rebirth begins, we see Tifa struggled with letting Cloud know that he was not really involved in the Nibelheim incident. There's that idea where, Cloud wasn't there. The idea is that Cloud was Zack, right? Which Zack was there with Sephiroth when Nibelheim burnt down. Cloud believes that Zack wasn't there. Right. But Cloud was just a regular jobber, just a regular soldier, right? Not even soldier class.
Oh, right.
So Tifa's like, that never happened, but she never really does tell him.
Yeah.
Right. She's too kind. She's like, you know what? I don't want to approach that.
Yeah.
I don't blame her.
I know.
How do you bring that up?
Given his reaction.
Yeah. So Cloud is influenced by Sephiroth to question her to question Tifa because Cloud saw her dead. In his mind, she was gone. There's this scene where Tifa has to remind Cloud that she is real. Right. It gets so bad at one point that she's almost killed by Cloud. I think you mentioned it earlier, right? At the reactor, where he slashes at her. Right?
Yeah.
But I think she dodges in time, or she falls into the pool of Mako, and then the giant Mako energy fish thing eats her up.
I know. Was it a guardian of the planet or
something like that? Yeah. Due to Rebirth's focus on connecting Remake to whenever the end of the game concludes, there's not much content about Tifa. I feel like she didn't get a lot of character development in Rebirth.
Right. It felt like she came up a lot in stories, but mostly because it was viewing Cloud and Cloud's memories and Cloud's life, and she was in a lot of it. So yeah, but not a lot happened to her.
Right. It wasn't on the level of Barrett, right, in his development.
Yeah.
So it wasn't anything like that. But I mean, she's exposed to constant fights, deaths, atrocities. She's almost killed by Cloud, which is her best friend. A little bit of personality on Tifa. She's empathetic, motherly, intuitive, reserved, both out of being observant and for, being emotionally shy. So, she's a kind person, right? She helps her friends out. Looking out for others. She rarely discusses her own feelings when she's asked. She will either express surprise or quickly change the subject. So she doesn't like to be the center of attention. Tifa does fight and she can defend herself. So, she's not like a princess in a castle type, character. She'll fight. Yeah. And she's a really good fighter too.
Yeah. Gloves.
I had her on my team because I took Aerith off and I'm like, you know what? I want to do more damage.
Yeah.
Right? And I gave Tifa a materia that allows her to use her
the auto unique
unbridled strength. Yeah. And then it just oh my gosh.
Oh, I know.
It was awesome.
It was kind of crazy. I felt like whenever the stagger occurred, she would quickly get up to the 200%.
Yeah.
That was nice.
So I was like, okay, cool, Tifa, you're in permanently.
Yeah.
Tifa is, she does suffer from grief and loss throughout her life. Maybe that's what's manifesting in that conflicted nature of being motherly, intuitive, but also shy. So let's get into the case study. At the time of Rebirth, Tifa Lockhart is a 20-year-old woman who has suffered many losses in her life. For example, when she was 8, she had lost her mother. When she was 15, 16, the crisis in Nibelheim occurred, which ended in her father being killed by Sephiroth, and she was mortally wounded. Additionally, when the events of Rebirth take place, she witnesses the destruction of Sector 7 and the death of people she was friends with or knew. Despite Tifa's resilience and strength, she is haunted by past losses and unable to cope with them at times. How can she, if she's constantly thrown into dangerous encounters with numerous creatures, bandits, and Sephiroth himself? She has experienced the death of family members and was literally killed herself. So it makes sense that there's intrusive thoughts, because there's times where she refers back to her dad dying, right? What was going on in Nibelheim? That makes sense. She's also avoiding the truth of what has occurred with Cloud and does not actually tell him what's going on. Because Cloud was just a regular soldier. I don't think she ever tells him. She tries to. And I think she talks to Aerith about it as well. But we never see that bear any fruit, essentially. So there's some guilt that Tifa feels throughout the games due to her trauma and losses as she attempts to protect others and will get in the way of the Barret or Cloud when they try to kill someone. So she does not improve the loss of life. Barret and Cloud can be very hot-headed. And Cloud does kill some guys when he goes, berserk, essentially. And Tifa tries to stop that. Same thing with Barret. Barret's going to shoot you up. But if Tifa's there, she's going to stop Barret. And I was doing this. I was going through the DSM-5 and everything. And I was like, you know what? She does not meet the full criteria for PTSD. Because, yes, these thoughts are intrusive, but they're not to the point where they're impacting her like Cloud. Cloud, has got these headaches, right? These memories, these flashbacks. I feel like Tifa's more capable of handling her trauma. Yeah. We don't see it as like a big main point of oh, she's a tortured soul, all this stuff. No, she's doing her best. She's resilient. So I was like, you know what? I don't feel okay just making up information to give her a diagnosis for the sake of the case study, right? Yeah. I was looking at unspecified anxiety maybe, and I was like, no, I don't think so. So what I looked into was a study on prevention of PTSD after trauma. So that's what we'll get into in a bit.
Oh, that's interesting. I know, I feel like we both talked about how Tifa did a good job or she's not really showing the symptoms of PTSD. She doesn't seem to have any sort of adverse reactions or, when you compare it to Cloud, not hallucinating and imagining the horrific traumatic event that occurred to her. Yeah. So I that seems like a good call.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, let's talk a little bit about that. And the reason why I say that, it's the way that, she deals with her memories is she's visiting the memory. She doesn't become stuck in it like Cloud does. So think about you're going on a car trip, right? Yeah, you see something horrific. You just glance at it. All right, keep going, right? But Cloud would get out of the car, stop, stare, maybe start, freaking out.
Yeah.
Tifa's not like that.
Yeah. Why do I fall under? Well, I feel like I'd be Cloud in this scenario. That's bad.
So let's talk a little bit about prevention of PTSD disorder after trauma by Kui, Gevodin, and Shalev 2016. So PTSD is a frequent, tenacious, and disabling consequence of traumatic events. The disorder's identifiable onset and early symptoms provide opportunities for early detection and prevention. The clinical features compromising PTSD are event-related symptoms. So these are intrusive recalls of aspects of the event, avoidance, reminders, and hypervigilance, along with dysphoria, hyperarousal, or anhedonia. So let's break those down, what those are, right? Let's start with hypervigilance. So this is checking for your area at a point where it's overwhelming, right? I got to make sure the door is closed. I got to make sure my back is against the wall. Mm-hmm. I got to make sure the windows are secure. If there was an emergency, how would I get out of here? Right? Yeah. Who could I save? So that's kind of like that hypervigilance. Dysphoria, essentially, maybe your thoughts don't match with what you're behaving or thinking, or feeling, right? Hyperarousal, just being very activated, very tense, very stressed. And anhedonia is lack of pleasure. So this is more like depression. Yeah. Right? Kind of I don't want to do anything. I don't feel like doing anything. PTSD is a prevalent consequence of both mundane traumatic events, such as road traffic. I like how they say mundane. Yeah. Road traffic accidents, which that's not mundane. That's pretty messed up. And we have protracted exposures to threats such as war. You don't have to go to war to suffer from PTSD. Right. That's what this is saying. This, PTSD can happen. So PTSD follows a distinct triggering event that has a clear onset point. Early PTSD symptoms develop within days of trauma exposure. Many trauma-exposed individuals are brought to the attention of emergency care services and helpers. These conditions create unique opportunities for detecting survivors at risk and providing preventive interventions. So 2 primary goals for early intervention are to firstly, mitigate the development of early symptoms, and secondly, increase the likelihood of remission in those who develop symptoms. Interventions addressing the first goal include attempts to reduce the stressfulness of the traumatic event. So stress management, need-based assistance, like what do you need right after the traumatic event? Interventions, are meant to reduce participants' initial responses to the event or its encoding in memory. So the idea is that the article is going to get into how do we disrupt that encoding of trauma so that the brain doesn't make it like such a profound memory that you're going to remember it always. What can we do to disrupt it? Right?
Yeah.
That's the idea. So studies addressing the second goal, which the second goal was to increase likelihood of remission in those who develop symptoms. The second goal is to include specific interventions, protocols delivered at different time intervals for traumatic events to survivors. Think of this as like therapy. There's going to be like cognitive behavioral therapy, things like that. And let's talk a little bit about vulnerability factors. So pre-existing vulnerability factors, this is before development of PTSD, range from neurobiological factors such as genetic endowment, epigenetic regulation, environmental factors. So what are you born with? What's your family's temperament? Have you had prior trauma exposure? Family and personal psychiatric history, lower education, stress, resourceless living conditions, behavioral factors. So there's a lot of things that go into a PTSD diagnosis. We want to know what the background is, right? What have you lived through already? Because you're going to be more susceptible to PTSD if you have a lot of things going on already.
Yeah.
Right. Peritraumatic, which is during trauma, are factors that include trauma intensity and type, intentional versus unintentional, peritraumatic symptoms, psychological, physical reactions, and gene expression. So this is during the trauma. Right. This is what's happening during it. Right. How intense was it? Right. What were your symptoms like at the time? Was your body, your heart rate was out of control, your breath rate was out of control. Right. So these two things, the pre-existing and the peritraumatic, which is during trauma, are all encompassing. And now we have the post-exposure factors, which are what happens after. What's your social support like? What's your finances like? What's your living arrangements like? These all add into that PTSD. So the current review will only focus on secondary and tertiary prevention, which targets the progression for psychopathology after traumatic event. So the study is going to focus on after the trauma, right? Not before. Interventions targeting elements in the progression of fear conditioning, emotional processing. Again, this is going to be therapies. How can we condition you to the fear in a way that you become desensitized to it? For example, trauma memories may consolidate within hours of trauma or during the first night of sleep. So what are some interventions that can disrupt that, right? It can be pharmacological, so it could be medication, right? Or it can be therapy. So the idea is to provide this within a timely manner, right, before the development of PTSD.
Okay. So intervening like pretty soon after the trauma occurred is a good indication of whether or like how this trauma will be processed or treated.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about interventions. So some psychological debriefing was used in a method from the 1980s to 1990s, which aimed at prevention long-term PTSD symptoms by promoting quick emotional processing of traumatic events. So the idea was like, hey, let's get you up to speed. This is what happened. This is what occurred. They're explaining it to you.
Yeah.
This method typically involved a single session within hours or a few days after trauma exposure, either in a group or individual setting, and included general education about trauma exposure, its effects, sharing and validation of individuals' experiences, and preparation for future encounters. However, well-conducted studies showed no evidence of beneficial effects and even suggested that debriefing may be negative.
Oh, really?
I was vibing with this at first, and I was like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. And they're like, no, it could actually be negative.
Did they dive into that at all as to why that might be?
I think this was more like a literature review, so they didn't dive too much into it. But I mean, I can think of like, if I went through something traumatic and somebody was explaining it to me, trying to, this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened. Well, who are you to let me know what my thoughts and emotions should be?
I was feeling like it could be making them relive the moment by having to retell it as well, and then further encoding it into their memory, which kind of feels like the opposite of what we're trying to do here.
Right.
Interesting. Okay.
Psychological intervention for this debriefing, it's not a good idea. So CBT, exposure-based CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, is exemplified by prolonged exposure protocols, which aims to achieve and maintain fear extinction through repeated exposure to trauma-related stimuli in a safe context, thereby providing a sense of control over reactions or reducing avoidance. So this is going to be like, session 1, this is what we talk about. Session 2 is how we break it down. Session 3, what are some interventions, right? Session 4, how can we intervene with those intrusive thoughts and flashbacks? That kind of stuff. Okay. Step by step. That's what CBT is more like that. So CBT challenges the patient's beliefs about the meaning and current implications of the trauma. So a way that you can think of it is like, I'm a trauma survivor. Let's take out the word trauma. You're a survivor, right? Changing the language, changing the thoughts of how you approach it.
Oh, okay.
So we do this in order to change the way that patients react to trauma-related reminders, right? To remove behavioral restriction and rules derived from traumatic experience and to reduce negative appraisal of self and others. So another idea is like, the world is neutral, right? But some people might be after trauma, the world is cruel, right? So how can we change that perspective? How can we change that belief? And trials of exposure CBT have generally demonstrated moderately positive results in reducing PTSD or symptoms in the long term. So this is therapy.
Yeah. It feels like CBT is one of the more popular ones right now. I don't remember if we discussed this while recording or not, but I remember you telling me that one of those reasons is because insurances love CBT.
Oh yeah,
because
insurances
it's
love
like
CBT.
Concrete steps
Session
laid out.
1, session 2, it's going to be 12 sessions, right? Insurance doesn't want to pay for infinite therapy.
Glad that CBT has been showing positive results.
Yeah.
I know we talked about in PTSD right now, but I've heard it being successful with other types of treatment as well. So, or other like disorders, treatment other disorders as well. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, I mean, that's CBT in a nutshell, essentially. So now we're going to move into pharmacological interventions, right? So this is medication. Hydrocortisone has been shown to effectively be effective, especially in patients who had never been treated for psychiatric disorders. Some also believe that the high dose exogenous, which is medication not produced in the body, so the hydrocortisone, right, is administered shortly after trauma, may promote recovery through enhancing synaptic plasticity and connectivity. So, new brain connections, right? That's what this is saying. That might actually be able to interrupt the trauma. We have propranolol, which is a beta adrenergic antagonist that crosses the blood-brain barrier and therefore capable of reducing the central nervous system adrenergic drive associated with defensive threat responses. So this is to ease, the defense response, the fight or flight, right, in a patient. So with this medication in healthy subjects, it has shown that administration prior to the exposure of post-traumatic narratives reduce the recollection of stressful elements of the narrative without affecting the general recall. So you can remember what happened. But the medication allows for it to not be as potent, not to be as dire.
Did it suggest when you would take this medication?
So this is going to be prior to exposure.
Oh, okay.
So but you never know, right? I mean, trauma could happen. Let's be
I was going to say, wait a second.
You're going to carry this around, Yeah, no.
You're like, oh crap, there's a car accident. Let me pop this thing right now.
Right.
No, okay.
Yeah,
I could see it being useful in conjunction with having to recall the traumatic event in order to reduce the fear. But the chances of this already being in your system when you have a traumatic event seems pretty low.
Yeah, unless you're carrying a bottle of it around or something.
Yeah, and why would you even have a bottle? That's interesting though.
Yeah, I mean, this is early treatment with this medication at preventing over consolidation of traumatic memories, blocking memory, enhancing influences of stress hormones. It therefore has to be stated while memories of trauma are still being formed and consolidated, preferably within hours of the traumatic event. So this can actually happen. You can take this hours, maybe a little bit after the traumatic event. But again,
okay, that's better.
Again, how are you going to have this? Our healthcare system. They're like, oh, you had some trauma here. No, that's going to take weeks, months, maybe.
Huh? Yeah. I wonder if this is carried by any sort of EMTs or maybe doctor. If you were to go to an emergency room, if they have it there, or if this is something that needs to be prescribed well ahead of time and then filled only at a pharmacy or something like that. Right. Because,
I'm pretty sure this is not over the counter.
Definitely not over the counter.
No way. Yeah. So let's get into oxytocin. So oxytocin is involved in emotional stress regulation, social engagement, and attachment. Olaf et al. 2010 has suggested that oxytocin may actually buffer the development of PTSD by reducing fear responses and increasing social functioning. So in a way, it's saying, okay, yes, the trauma happened, right? But don't get stuck in it. what else can you be doing right now? Which is, I think, is a little insensitive, but medication, right? This is the medication portion of it.
Yeah.
So PTSD is likely multi-causal, and such individuals with differing vulnerabilities and different exposure and post-exposure circumstances may come to express the PTSD symptom complex through individual specific pathways and be responsive to individual specific interventions. So what is this saying? PTSD is not a one fit all, right? Doesn't fit everyone. The way that it is expressed, how it affects you, it's all going to be different. We're all different, right? You know, take this study with a grain of salt, right? This might work for somebody. This might not work for somebody. So let's get back into how that relates to Tifa. So Tifa, I mean, there's no therapy in Midgar, right? like
maybe after these events.
Maybe, right? I don't know what their medication's like either, right? So, you know, Tifa had a lot of terrible things happen to her, but she's able to recover from her injuries and is cared by multiple people. You know, she's able to work, right? Form new bonds, which keeps her mind off of trauma. She's resilient. She does not allow the death of her father and her own injuries to become obstacles. She doesn't get stuck in it. She still thinks about the trauma, but think of it as a way as she's visiting the trauma, right? And not becoming stuck in it. Like I said, with the car analogy, right? That I said earlier, you know, and she has her moments, right? We see her mourning Aerith's death.
Yeah.
She takes it in strides though, because she's like, okay, let me have my moment, right? And it's off to the next game. And she has those moments, you know, she continues on that journey. Also, you know, with Tifa, she increases, you know, social functioning, especially when Aerith becomes part of the party, right? Because like they become besties, right?
Yeah.
The rest of them are like hanging out, talking about Cloud, making fun of Cloud. You know,
that's
comparing
true.
Them to a chocobo, right?
Yeah.
Or a little bird. You remember
that?
Yeah,
Cloud Jr. Or is that what it was called?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
But she's also taking up martial arts, taking care of her cat, befriending Cloud, befriending the Avalanche group, working different jobs like I mentioned earlier, which allows her to disrupt the encoding process of trauma. She's so busy. She's got so much going on that she doesn't have time. And so I also want to emphasize that trauma affects us all differently. And that's, you know, our process to heal and live through trauma will differ. You know, so everyone has their own process. As we see with Tifa, you know, she was able to thrive after these difficult situations. She was able to, you know, to thrive out of everything that she was given. And, you know, she's in the party. She's well functioning. She helps them out. I mean, trauma affects us all differently. And, you know, Tifa's able to deal with it.
Wow. Good for Tifa. Yeah, it's interesting how they're all experiencing trauma, and you can see the responses based off of the trauma. We see a bit of Barrett's trauma in this game.
Yeah.
There's a very emotional part of the game that involves Barrett, and I'm about to talk about Red 13's trauma as a child and how that affected him.
Any thoughts on Tifa? Or
I'm glad you talked about the treatments for PTSD. Very helpful with the cognitive behavioral therapy, but also loved seeing the different medications that you just talked about. And like, I always wondered about that because I felt like I knew that PTSD was linked to like memory. Well, obviously, I mean, if you don't remember a traumatic event, sometimes your body might, but usually I feel like it's going to be the mind.
Right.
Yeah. But, or maybe not. Maybe it's mostly in the body. I don't know.
Body Keeps the Score, right? That's a book that we have to read in grad school.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah.
Which I don't know if we actually read. I think I read that on like an MFT class that I took. Essentially, it's saying that, you know, a lot of these symptoms can be psychosomatic. That your body remembers the trauma, right? Which is the increased heart rate. You know, maybe the panic attacks are related to that. You know, the body really does keep that score.
So I guess that would mean even if you were to forget the memory, repress the memory, then your body still might remember, even if it's not in your mind.
That's why in grad school, I think with any, you know, like program, they'll tell you like, hey, the best combination is therapy and medication for recovery.
That is true. I haven't had to think about that for a while, so I forgot about
that's like my daily, so, you know.
And that's why you're here. That's why you are smarter than me in this world. Oh, man.
I'd say more experience.
Well,
let's talk about Nanaki. My date, actually. That was my date. Yeah, because I did all the side quests, and that screwed me over. But I didn't want to reset. He's such a good boy.
Yeah. So I guess real quick before we dive into it, at the Gold Saucer, there's like an opportunity to have a date with whatever character you have like the highest relationship with.
Yeah.
For me, I was able to get that with Tifa, so I went on a date with Tifa. But if you don't have a high relationship with either, I think, Tifa or Aerith, or if your highest relationship is anybody else, I'm pretty sure you go on a date with Red 13.
I did all the side quests for him, so
yeah.
his affinity was maxed.
That's awesome.
Oh, okay. And I was about to reset. I'm like, oh man, but then he was so happy, wagging his tail. I'm like, I'm not gonna reset. Fuck that.
It's
What the heck, man? No.
It's funny how you feel for these like virtual characters,
right?
Who really
code, right? They're just numbers on the fucking
it's just programming. Yeah, and yet I'm like, nah, I can't let him down like that. I would feel the same way. I think I told myself that too, because I knew that the part was coming up, and I'm like, okay, whoever answers the door right now, if it's Red 13, you just got to do it. I can't reset this. I was like, oh, Tifa. Okay, cool. Anyways, thank you for talking about Tifa. I'm going to give us a little backstory on Red 13 and then talk about his like traumatic event, but as a child, which is called ACEs. And I will talk about that in a bit. So Red 13, also known as Nanaki, which is revealed in the middle of this game, is this anthropomorphic dog. Well, actually, no, he's not really anthropomorphic. I feel like I use that term to describe a animal that is walking like a human or acts like a human, but no, this fool is just like a dog.
Yeah, he's no Beastar.
No,
right?
No yeah. Or even Kate Sith, really. I felt Kate Sith anthropomorphic because he's like walking around and like doing human stuff, but he looks like a cat. But no, Nanaki is just a dog that happens to be able to speak. And he was also the subject of the scientific experiments in Dr. Hojo's lab, which seems to be a reoccurring theme. Evil scientist experimented on a bunch of people, caused them trauma. So Nanaki is relatively young for his species. I think in human years, it's like 48 years old, but it'd be the equivalent for him in his lifespan to be like a teenager right now when we see him throughout the game. And before the events of this video game and the remake, Red 13 is from this place called Cosmo Canyon. His mother, we don't know her name, but his father was this once great, his title was the Watcher of the Veil. When he like was the Watcher Defender of Cosmo Canyon. His name was Seto. And this rivaling tribe called the Gi invaded Cosmo Canyon. Seto ran off, left Red 13 and his mother to fend for themselves during the invasion. And during this battle, the mom unfortunately did not survive. And Red 13 was thereafter left in the care of the elder of Cosmo Canyon named Geisel? Bugenhagen?
Bugenhagen. What a name.
I know. It sounds so German. And I put that he kind of reminds me of Master Roshi from Dragon Ball Z.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I don't know. He just kind of gave that vibe to me. But Red 13, because of this, views his father with like this disdain for being a coward who left him and his mom to die, kind of shifting the type of person Red 13 is to now be someone who strives to be more courageous than his cowardly father. He often uses his father's cowardice as motivation to keep going on his quest. And I feel like at one point he vows and like says he never wants to be like him. And he's never going to do that.
Yeah.
He's never going to run away. So a lot of this stuff was detailed in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. But in this other spin-off game I mentioned earlier called, Before Crisis, Final Fantasy VII. So I think I might have mentioned Crisis Core, but I think this is like a PlayStation level spin-off game called Before Crisis. I don't
really
know if this was... I just wasn't keeping tabs, so I'm not sure if this was released in US or not. I'm going to do a quick...
Yeah, go for it.
Search.
Before Crisis, really.
Before Crisis, Final Fantasy VII. Yeah.
Was this a mobile game?
September 24, 2004 is an action role-playing video game developed by Square Enix. Released for the FOMA mobile service? What is FOMA? Anyways, okay, so there's some lore on Red 13 in a mobile game from 2004.
Oh, you love to see it, right?
Yeah, that's what you love to see. Yeah, I know. You looked at me like, what are you talking about?
Like,
are you sure you don't mean Crisis Core? And I'm like, no.
Crazy.
Yeah,
you learn something new every day.
In this game, we learn that Red 13 was taken into Shinra's custody when the Turks went to Cosmo Canyon in search of his endangered species, specifically for Hojo to research on.
Hojo's such a...
And listen to this part. I cannot believe they put this in the game. So initially they were going to take a female member of Red 13 species named Denna, but Red 13 jumped in to save her, and they labeled Nanaki, or Red 13, as the name Red 13 in honor of Hojo's 13th experiment. And supposedly Hojo wanted this creature, this species, to crossbreed Red 13 species with humans or Cetras, and even in this case, Aerith.
Yeah, there's in the remake, in the original, there's a scene where they're in a tube together, like a prison together.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I read this and I was like, no, wait. Well, I had to do a double take on the reading. I read it again. I'm like, what? Yeah, that's wild. It is. I hate Hojo. Anyways, so back to the remake continuity. We first meet Red 13 in Final Fantasy VII Remake when Avalanche rescues Aerith from Hojo's lab. And when we first meet him, he has this like deeper voice, a wise cadence to the way he speaks. And we later learn in this game, Rebirth, that this is his attempt to actually seem older and not childish because he wants to be taken more seriously. So his actual voice is much more like juvenile, playful, just kind of like a young, dumb teenager. But he only reserves like that voice whenever he's talking to Aerith in private, which we catch a glimpse of in the game. I thought that Cloud was hallucinating somebody else at that moment.
Dang, man.
Yeah.
Cloud's already off the deep end.
Yeah. I was just like, oh, he's just hallucinating Zack's voice or something at this point. Okay. But no, it was actually Red 13's real voice. And this kind of worked for me because I was like, yeah, this dude is some wise dog. I really like his character. I wonder who he is. And then once he revealed his true voice, I'm like, oh, he's just some kid.
Damn.
I know. I thought less of him a little bit, not going to lie.
It caught me off guard as well. Because I think in the original, there's no voice acting.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's a change in dialogue in the way he speaks. Oh, I don't remember catching that.
Yeah, it's a bit harder to convey via just dialogue. But anyways, when the Avalanche crew returns to Cosmo Canyon in Rebirth, we learn the truth about Red 13's name, which is Nanaki, and a bit more about his home. He then introduces us to Bugenhagen, who pretty much raised Nanaki on his own. And we learn more about this rivaling faction that invaded Nanaki as a child, once again, called the Gi, and about this nearby cave in which the Gi's spirits reside. Nanaki is then told to take this challenge alongside the help of another Avalanche member who just happens to be Barrett. And I think at this point in the game, they don't really like vibe.
They're like, really? Barrett?
Yeah. So it's funny how they force them to go and do this like trial together within this cave of the Gi. In the cave, Red 13 or Nanaki and Barrett have to fight these ghosts, spirits of the Gi who are trapped in there. I believe it was because it had something to do with the black materia, right? Like they lost.
They lost it.
They lost it. I forgot who took it originally.
I don't remember, but I know they wanted Seto to get the black materia, right? Nanaki's dad, but he failed.
Okay. So that's why he ran. Yeah. At the end of the cave, they fight and speak with the leader of the Gi spirits, whose name is Gi Natak. And he shows Red 13 the true fate of his father, Seto, who was not a coward, who actually died sacrificing himself against the Gi attack and is now petrified in this valley. This revelation kind of fills Red 13's heart with a bit of relief and pride as he learns his father was actually brave and not the coward he thought he was his whole life, which is kind of crazy to go your whole life thinking that your dad just like left you and your mom to die when in reality he sacrificed himself to try and defend you.
Yeah. It's a misunderstanding.
Yeah. So Gi Natak asks Avalanche for their help in retrieving the black materia and lifting this curse. So this task, then sends the crew back on their way to find the black materia before Sephiroth gets to it. And this kind of concludes the like unique individualized story of Nanaki. I don't think anything really happens to him or the plot after this or like happens to just him. There's nothing.
Have you watched the date scene with him?
No.
Okay.
Why?
There's a little bit in there that's like, oh, interesting. I mean, I could just say
Go
he says, he asks Cloud, hey, can you protect Aerith? Because we know something that you shouldn't know. He's talking about Aerith's death. He alludes to it.
How? So they both saw it already?
So, yes. So I think Aerith knows. And I think, like those early scenes where she's talking to this young kid, which is Nanaki.
Yeah.
Right? I think Aerith explains what's going on. And also he's connected to the Cetra as well, I believe. So he has a different sense, right, of what's going to happen. Because he's like, in a way, they already know what's going to happen. So he asks Cloud in the little Ferris wheel.
Yeah.
And the way he brings it up is like, just stays in the Ferris wheel, okay? And it's like, what are we talking about? Right? And so he explains to Cloud, like, not obviously she's going to die, but like, you need to protect Aerith. Something's going to happen. Please promise me you're going to protect her.
Wow.
Right.
I didn't know that happened.
Yeah, so that's why I was like, that made me even feel better about my date with Nanaki. I was like, oh, okay.
I can't believe I kind of missed a plot point because he went on a date with Tifa.
I didn't go watch those actually, because I want to see what Barrett's date is like. If you're mean to everybody, you go on a date with Sid, Vincent, and Kate Sith.
No way,
Yeah,
really?
yeah.
The three of them?
Yeah, I think so. It's like a boys' night.
Wait, do you even know Vincent by then?
Yeah, you do.
Okay.
By the second time, I think it's chapter 12 whenever you go back to the gold saucer, right?
Oh, I forget you go back. Yeah, okay. Well, wow. Thank you for that lore drop there that I don't remember. I didn't see, and I couldn't even... nobody online mentioned it when I was looking up Nanaki's backstory.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, all right, cool.
Well, based on the trauma that Nanaki experienced as a child because of this invasion of the Gi and the subsequent loss of his parents, Nanaki is suffering from adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACE or ACEs. And ACE is defined as any potentially traumatic event that occurs during childhood. In Nanaki's case, he's had several things occur during his childhood. Hell, he's still a child right now.
Yeah.
But first, his home was invaded. People's lives were lost, including his parents. And he was taken and held against his will in a research facility where they experimented on him and many others. And not to mention most of the trauma seen during all the fight scenes of the game, also some of the cutscenes, and having to deal with enemies who are trying to kill you. It's all traumatic in itself.
Oh, yeah.
But some of these other common risk factors, like in real life, not just in Nanaki, include a lower income or level of education, families with high levels of parenting or economic stress, families that use physical forms of corporal punishment, such as like spanking, and families with high conflict, negative communication styles, and even certain branching outside of the family, like the community, can be risk factors for ACEs, like those with high rates of violence, crime, poverty, and unemployment rates. And there was a connection with neighbors who don't know or interact each other is shown to increase the potential of ACEs occurring.
That makes sense.
And I'm like, yeah. When you think about it logically, I'm like, okay, because there's low interactions between the community and then so there must be other reasons to encourage that behavior. But yeah, there's also there was a questionnaire I found, or a survey you could take to see what your ACE score was. I should have taken it. It wasn't that long. I think it was maybe somewhere between 10 and 20 questions, but I'm linking it in the show notes in case anybody's curious and wants to see how many traumatic events you had during childhood. There's some in there. I remember skimming through the questions and I was kind of surprised. I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have thought that was something traumatic, but yeah, I guess so. Huh. But anyways, ACEs is actually fairly common. One article suggested that 64% of all U.S. adults have experienced at least one adverse childhood experience before the age of 18, and 17% had experienced 4 or more.
Wow.
Yeah. I was like, that's pretty high. There is unfortunately a positive correlation with ACEs in many health conditions later in life. And when I say positive correlations, I mean not positive as in something good or great that happened, but meaning the relationship between ACEs and negative outcomes are in the same direction. Right. So increase in ACEs in childhood means an increase in other negative factors.
Right. Mental and physical.
And mental and physical.
Yeah, it could be diabetes, high blood pressure, PTSD,
Yeah.
It's just listing some things.
So many health. And I list a few of them there, but I wanted to make note of that positive correlation term because it feels like that's something we who have done social science stuff are used to. But I feel like I've mentioned this in front of some other friends or just people who didn't do science or research, and they're just like, what do you mean positive correlation? Or they don't know what that term means. So I'm like, let me clarify.
Break it down, right?
I don't mean this is a good thing. Right. But one article contributes ACEs as a direct contributor to up to 1.9 million heart disease cases and 21 million depression cases in the US, which was kind of insane.
Yeah.
Some other negative outcomes include things that Joe just mentioned, chronic diseases such as cancer, diabetes, heart disease, more mental health issues like suicide and depression, and maternal and child health problems, even an involvement in sex trafficking, it showed.
Okay.
But also want to reiterate that just because an ACE has occurred, this does not mean any of these negative outcomes will happen or that these will even develop. These are just correlations. These are just chances that these things will occur, but they're not guaranteed.
Gotcha.
So want to put that out there. Just because you may or may not have had an ACE doesn't mean you're going to have heart disease later on in life. So many other factors for that one in particular. I want to talk a bit about the prevention of ACEs. What can we do to prevent them from occurring? Bring it back to the game. In Nanaki's case, I'm sure if, Cosmo Canyon was never invaded, these traumatic events never would have occurred. He wouldn't have lost his family. He wouldn't have lost the protector, and maybe they could have stopped Shinra or something like that. But I don't know. These are a bunch of what ifs. So not much we could have done in Nanaki's case to prevent ACEs from happening. But for everyone else in our real world, there are several individual and community factors that can be implemented to help prevent ACEs. First of which is to tackle the community risk factors. I believe a lot of these were gathered from the CDC website on ACEs. So a lot of these are heavily vetted and researched and stuff, but something to help increase the community or to get rid of community risk factors for ACEs is to strengthen economic support to families through implementations of more family-friendly work policies and improving the financial security of each home. This one seems to make a lot of logical sense there. If you have more money, you could probably get better support and buy better support, buy childcare or whatever else you need.
Right. Okay. Yeah. More money doesn't solve the problem, but it helps.
It helps. Yeah. And by protecting against violence and adversity through promoting social norms that are against corporal punishment, in promoting the bystander approach of intervention, and reducing the use of violence as a means of communication, and promoting legislation that adheres to these similar principles. I think they want to, all of this is kind of a very legislative way of saying to reduce violence in communities.
Okay.
Violence and adversity is a huge indication of ACEs. So by reducing violence, it could reduce the chance of an ACE occurring. On a more individual level, less community, we could teach skills to children and families that improve these social and emotional learning, safe dating and other healthy relationships, and improve parenting skills.
That makes sense.
Yeah. If you have a better basis for a healthy relationship as a child, you're going to have a better understanding of a healthy relationship as an adult. So yeah, I think teaching those skills would be important to reduce the ACEs. And then enrolling children in mentoring or after-school programs or other programs that promote family engagement and high-quality childcare can all help prevent ACEs from occurring. So now that we know what ACEs are and how to maybe prevent them from occurring, what do we do once an ACE has already occurred? This kind of depends on the type of trauma experienced for an ACE. ACE, it seems to be more of an umbrella term. It stands for, like I said, adverse childhood experiences. But what those experiences are and what those trauma is differs from each person.
Right.
Was it something as not simple, but something as emotionally damaging as a parental divorce, or maybe something a bit more physically harming like abuse. And typically the treatments for the trauma experienced, the treatments are for the trauma experience and not necessarily the ACE in general. So something like a divorce would probably be a bit more focused on processing some of the challenges that come with your parents splitting, whereas treatment for an abuse would be a bit more of an involved process. And I think maybe CBT might end up coming into play there.
Right. Narrative therapy, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So in an article that spoke about improving health outcomes in adult survivors of ACEs, they recommended CBT for managing the health problems, but they also stated other mindfulness-based therapies as showing promise. They didn't specify which ones, but I know just involving mindfulness into the therapy.
Right. There's mindfulness CBT. That kind of stuff. Right?
Yeah.
Narrative is a little bit, I would say, mindful as well, because what narrative is we're creating a narrative and then we're changing it, the language of it. So that's more, survivor based instead of victim based.
Okay. I can see how mindfulness would play into that too then, for sure. So tying it back into the game, maybe once Nanaki and the rest of Avalanche's journey, come to an end, they can all find some good therapists to help them out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, this kind of sums up my discussion on specifically Nanaki and Aces in general. So while I feel like I didn't talk about Nanaki too much in this, there wasn't any real like evidence for a case study for him. He didn't really show any like symptoms of a disorder that needed.
Oh yeah, I agree.
That was like a diagnosable
also, he's like
thing.
a dog, right?
Oh damn! You want to tell that to his face? No, I get you. He like Tifa seems to be well supported.
Yeah,
and
he's
adjusted.
resilient. Yeah,
He's also young, and I'm sure there's hard evidence for this, but I feel like there's a phrase of just like children are more resilient, and I think that kind of concludes our discussion on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, a game we started off a little lukewarm about, but kind of grew to love.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about it?
Final Fantasy VII?
Yeah.
I mean,
I feel like we kind of got a lot.
Yeah, we got a lot.
We
got a lot. It was a good game. Great even, but it has its faults.
Yeah.
Right. Also, do you remember the first time you opened the menu for the game? Because I was overwhelmed as hell when I opened the main menu for, I don't know if you remember, but when I did, I was like, oh god, there's so much to this menu. It was scary.
Oh, the main menu of
like when you hit the pause screen.
Oh yeah. Yep. I sure did. There was a lot of redundancies there too.
Yeah.
I really wish they cleaned that menu up. Damn. But yeah.
Menu talk.
Menu talk. I know. It's like we want to talk more about game design as well too, and yeah, trying to find the balance there. But
all right. Do we have time for the what else?
Yeah. Maybe we'll give a quick rundown. I mean, I know you've been playing Persona 3 Reload, so would love to hear about that.
Yeah, I can go for it. Persona 3 Reload. It's a JRPG, right? You're in high school. You're a cool dude, right? Making friends, and then you're fighting shadows at night, which are the enemies, right? You go up this tower. It's like 300 floors or something. So each month you're going through a certain amount of floors before the full moon, because the full moon is when the boss fight happens.
Oh,
so you're cultivating friendships that makes your persona stronger, right? And if anyone listened to our Persona 5 episode, this is going to be similar.
Got it.
You're leveling up, fighting the boss, hanging out with friends. That's the cycle.
And you said you're going up the tower.
So it's like reverse mementos.
Oh, okay.
If you remember, P5 was the tower down. Like,
are there social aspects then where you're in high school and like going to class? And,
you're just making
people?
social links. Yeah, okay. I can name. You get the guy that's into older women.
Oh,
he's trying to date his teacher.
That's about fun. Right for this series.
You got a guy that loves to eat. He's a gourmet king, as they call him. You got Tanaka, which is the salesman, the one that Tanaka Commodities that sells random like hoax products. Oh. Yeah, there's some very interesting social links in this one. It's strange. You got a guy that's dying of a terminal illness.
Oh wow.
This game is very heavy on death. Like, I think in the original, the intro even had just like Memento Mori just plastered all over it. This game is very sad. A lot of sad things happen. So, yeah. But I love this game. This is like the third or fourth time I'm playing it.
Wow.
I'm playing Reload, so that's the remake.
Yeah.
Which I'm really enjoying it. The music's amazing. The battle's amazing. The quality of life stuff they put in there, awesome.
And it's on Game Pass too, so if anybody has it, you can check it out there. Yeah, I really want to play it. I feel like I've been playing some other stuff too, and that's why I haven't had a chance to get to it, but we both love Persona 5 Royal. I'm sure I would love this game too if I had the chance right now. But
yeah, I think it's good that you took a break from the RPGs, because we had Infinite Wealth, Final Fantasy 7. I think if you jumped into P3, I think you'd be like burnt out on RPGs for sure.
I think that's the other. I mean, I'm playing Dragon's Dogma 2, but it's not as narrative heavy. Yeah, a bit more exploratory. Well, I'll check it out, I'm sure, at some point this year. Feels like there's going to be a lull for me coming up. I know Thousand Year Door's coming out next month. I'm still on the fence about picking it up, but I would like to eventually play it. Anyways, for me, I've been playing, like I said, Dragon's Dogma 2, but haven't gotten too deep into it yet. Okay. I think I'm maybe like 3 or 4 hours in. Narratively, not too much happens. It just kind of gives like some
go here, do
beats.
This, right?
Yeah. I am really enjoying like the world exploration and like running around with the pawns. I know they just dropped a patch that reduced the frequency of the pawns talking, which it didn't really bother me too much yet, but I could see how it could.
Oh, I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think the problem is like they were saying the same thing like every 5 minutes.
Oh, that does not bother me at all.
Oh, okay.
I think it's hilarious.
Yeah.
But that's just my sense of humor.
I mean, like, I'm curious to see what they did with it there. But yeah, so I haven't had a chance to really feel like I got into the game quite yet. I am enjoying it
enough,
because I've been playing a couple other games, some indie ones. One I mentioned to you is called Before Your Eyes, which is a really quick, like 90-minute game. But what it does is it takes this one of the most unique game mechanics I've ever seen and involve your blinking into the game. So you do have to enable your webcam if you have one, and it gives you a warning that it's going to be using the webcam, but they're not recording anything and they're not saving this anywhere, so it's not going anywhere. So yeah, just in case you're worried about that like privacy invasion thing, which I totally get. But yeah, the game has you relive the life of this artist, like this person, and you have to like retell your story to this God who is going to judge your life and determine whether you can go into the afterlife or not. So your soul is like fished out of the water by this like sketchy looking wolf guy who's trying. He gets some sort of incentive if a soul is deemed worthy to go into the afterlife, or he gets something out of it. So he's constantly like looking for souls that have a good, worthy story to tell. And then he stumbles upon you, and then he feels like you're a winner. And you go through the game just from the point of view of this person. And the way it incorporates the blinking is that you'll see like the majority of the game is very narrative and very cutscene. You're mostly just looking around and maybe not even really clicking. It really is just like you're blinking. There's some stuff you could click on and look more into, but it really is mostly you're blinking. But as you're visiting these moments of this person's life, like maybe you're a baby in the kitchen and your parents are doing dishes and they're talking or something, and you're like looking around in the room, eventually you'll notice like a little metronome on the bottom and it ticks back and forth. And if you blink when that metronome is on the screen, you then advance to the next cutscene.
Okay.
So sometimes you'll want to like stay in a nice moment and want to hear more of the conversation or see more of the world that you're in. There's one part where you're like laying down in the stars or laying down outside next to this girl you have a crush on and you're like 11 years old or something. She's like the neighbor and you both snuck out in the middle of the night to just get in your sleeping bags and lay outside and look at the stars. And I was like really enjoying this like moment. And then the metronome came up and I was like, don't blink. Do not blink right now. And there's even like a little mini game where if you hovered the mouse pointer over certain stars, you could connect them.
Oh, okay.
And at the moment of the game, the main character was trying to figure out whether he should go to this prestigious art school that's going to be in a different state, I think, or somewhere far, or if he should stay where he is now. And as you're looking in the sky and the stars, like you could connect the stars and the message "stay here" comes up. And I made sure I did not blink until I spelt out all of those words in the stars. And the game is just full of so many charming moments. It is also very moving, very emotionally draining.
Okay.
I told you, like, I don't know if I've cried this hard at a video game before. And for a 90-minute video game to then get me this powerfully, it was amazing. Like, this is one of my, I don't know about favorite, but if there was like a top 10 video games of all time, I might put it up there for myself in terms of how it impacted me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I cannot stop praising this game. I recognize it's not for everybody. Not everyone's going to want to be in that emotional space or even enjoy that kind of narrative thing. Yeah, I don't know. If it sounds remotely interesting at all to anybody, I highly suggest giving it a chance. It's also, I don't know if it's on consoles. I know I played it on PC.
Okay.
Definitely.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, I know. I talked
it piqued
about
my interest for sure.
Yeah. I was like, oh, maybe we could get you to play it on stream or something.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah, maybe one day. And then we could talk about, there's probably a lot we could talk about in that game as well, even though it's like 90 minutes long. The other game I've been playing, also heavily themed, like a heavier emotional theme, is Tales of Kenzera Zao, which is an indie like Metroidvania that just came out a couple of weeks ago from the time we're recording. Or no, a week ago from the time we're recording. This is a indie game made by Abubakar Salim. He is an actor that is coming out in the new House of the Dragon season. He was in Raised by Wolves. He played the character of Father. And I know there were several... He's done quite a lot of acting and voice acting, but those were the two roles that I feel like kind of pretty popular for him. And I think when he was 13 years old, he lost his father to, I forget if it was cancer or a heart attack or something like that. And speaking of like aces, like losing your father at a young age kind of like stuck with him. Mm-hmm. And he still feels like he is grieving and created this game as a way to process his grief. So in the game, you start off as like this boy in this, it's called like an Afrofuturist society. I feel like I'm doing a disservice by saying this, but it's the most popular analogy of something like Wakanda in Black Panther. And he, this boy, his name, I forget his name because you don't really play as him too much. He's handed I think it's Subari actually, is the name of the character. And he's handed this book from his mother because his father died in the game recently. And your mom says like, this book is the story that your father wrote and wanted you to have like after he died. So you read the book and I think the book's titled like Tales of Kenzera. Oh, okay. And the main character in the book is a shaman named Zhao. And the shaman, Zhao, like lost his father too in the story. And his father was a shaman before him. And the way the game plays and who you play as Zhao, like starts off with you meeting, I think, like a spirit or god of death called Kalunga. Yeah. And you kind of make a deal with him to gather these three spirits in exchange for your father's spirit. I'm not 100% sure what he wants to do with this father's spirit, or if he just wants to talk to him again or something like that, or what. So the majority of the game, you are like exploring this world, this in a Metroidvania style, side-scrolling combat, and trying to settle these three spirits' lives in order to exchange for your father's spirit. This game, I've told you a lot about this, and I know you've been researching it, but I feel like the combat's fun. The gameplay itself is like satisfying and good. It's not like mind-blowing. I think what is hitting really well with me so far is like the emotional narrative beats and the way the story is told. One of the most story-heavy Metroidvanias I've played, and it's dealing a lot about processing grief and death and afterlife, and you find other characters whose parents are died, and it's your job as a shaman to help them process that grief. And then you also find other characters who are like kind of your friends and equal to you, who are shamans of a different tribe or a different area, who are dying themselves. And, you're then having to process that yourself, as well as help them process their death. And it's a very emotionally heavy game, but I'm really enjoying it for that narrative beat. But yeah, I think that mostly wraps up what I've been playing. I'll probably jump back into Dragon's Dogma 2 once I'm done with Tales of Kenzera. But yeah, I guess...
takes it for today, right?
Yeah, that does it. Thank you all so much for listening. Today was especially at the end here, was a bit of a heavier topic, and I just really appreciate anyone who's listening right now. And thank you. Oh, we didn't even talk about what we're going to do for the next episode, but I think it'll probably end up being Alan Wake. I think, actually.
It might be Alan Wake or Tales.
Yeah, maybe a combo of both.
Maybe.
But we'll figure that out and like talk about it, post about it. We're still streaming and everything, so catch us streaming Alan Wake. We're probably going to be done with it soon. Then we'll probably move on to Alan Wake 2 right after that and get that story going. But if you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to email us at mind.controllers.pod@gmail.com. Yeah, any other parting words, Joe?
No, just thank you for sticking with us. These are always fun to do, right? I really do enjoy talking about gaming and a little educational stuff, right? It's mostly about the gaming, though.
Yeah.
Love the games.
Same here. All right, everybody. You take care of yourselves. Love you all. Bye.